came on did not enjoy the fact that there was a woman high up.
Really?
And made her life a living hell.
No way.
And I remember this recently because there's been a lot of turmoil going on in Iran, so it's brought back memories. But she was in jail every other day.
Welcome back, peeps, to another episode of the Tooth or Dare podcast, peeps, with your peep, Irene. How would you describe the difference between Sonicare versus oscillating, rotating toothbrushes?
All right, so
Big ask.
a big
question.
ask, yeah, big ask.
Big ask. The question that I get often in social media too.
All right, so the technology, when we're looking at what a toothbrush does to disrupt that biofilm, we're looking at two things. We're looking at the frequency, how fast that toothbrush is moving, as well as the amplitude. How much coverage is it, surface coverage is it covering? So oscillating, rotating, pulsating is...
Describe to the viewers at home the visual aspect of what you're seeing with the two types of technology.
Okay.
So describe to them what does Philips do versus what do other people do.
Right.
Yeah.
So that oscillating, pulsating moves very fast.
Yeah.
And it's moving kind of like
circularly.
this. Right. But it's covering a very specific spot.
Yeah.
So very technique dependent. Whereas with a Sonicare, it's that really wide amplitude. So it's making a really, really big sweep and it's moving really, really fast.
Yeah.
So that combination together gives us something which is exclusive to that technology called dynamic fluid action. So it's actually creating fluid movement in the oral cavity. It's creating disruption of biofilm 2 to 4 millimeters beyond the brush because of that fluid movement, that disruption.
You're recording this episode live at... Where am I? I'm not at Chicago Midwinter. I'm not at Greater New York. I'm in Toronto at ODA at the Philips booth, recording some fun podcasts with friends because I'm local.
Yay.
Hi, Tina.
Hi.
Those of you that remember Tina Maviryannakis, she was on our podcast a while ago. I'll link the link below to watch the first episode, which was, we were actually just talking about COVID time, kind of pre-COVID, mid-COVID time. But we've never done the full, get to know Tina episode. I want to do that one. Can we do that one?
Sure.
Because, I really don't know much about you in your younger years.
No.
Although, we hang out.
You mean just a couple of years ago?
Oh, right,
Younger
right. Because
years.
she's 14.
I'm 14, yeah.
Take me back. Take me back to, birth.
Birth is a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I'm the second child. I have an older brother and grew up quite
Would you grow up in Toronto?
friendly.
Were you born in Toronto?
No, I was not born in Toronto. I was born in Iran, in Tehran. And I lived there until there was a revolution in Iran and we had to leave. So we left when I was 5 and went to the UK. So I grew up in the UK and moved to Canada when I was 15.
Do you remember moving? Do you remember what?
Yeah, I do.
What do you remember about? Because you're that similar story with me. Romania was a communist country. My parents left during that fall of communism. I don't remember much. What do you remember?
I do. I remember quite a bit because it was, it wasn't a simple leave the country. There was war that happened and there was a lot of trauma. Family trauma, so you kind of remember that. Interestingly enough, I don't have PTSD about it. It's
Says who?
too true.
I'd like to see that therapist report, please, and thank you.
Well, I'm in denial about it. How's that? And I think it was just it was a communal situation. Everyone was going through it, so it wasn't happening to me specifically. But I do remember it, and it was a family thing, so that's why I think I don't necessarily have personal trauma about it.
Yeah. So, and then the move, was that an easy move? Was that?
I don't think any moves like that are easy.
Right.
As a child, pretty easy.
You're 5. You're like, cool. We're gonna go play with toys somewhere else.
Exactly. But for my parents, when I think back now to what they had to go through at different stages of their lives, I think, oh God, they were way more resilient than I would be today.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if that's
how old
just
were
a
your
case
parents?
of
young 30s, 20s?
No, 30s. Yeah. My brother's older than me, so Yeah, they would have been. They're young parents.
Yeah.
But they would have been in their 30s.
Mine were in their 20s. Like,
yeah,
Dad was
gosh.
28, Mom was 27.
Yeah.
Can you imagine, like,
right? And then
like
starting all over again.
Yeah, like literally like military troops up and down the streets with like guns and tanks and things, and you're
It's
like,
crazy.
cool, so I have a baby
Yes.
at 27, I'm gonna like flee a country illegally and like find a new life with no money, like
And
I
build
could
again.
not
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah. No, it's horrific. And, you know, they had really amazing jobs. And that was one of the things. My mom was pretty high up in the National Oil Company. And the new regime that came on did not enjoy the fact that there was a woman high up
Really?
and made her life a living hell.
No way.
And I remember this recently because there's been a lot of turmoil going on in Iran, so it's
Yeah.
brought back memories. But she was in jail every other day.
No
and we laugh
way.
about it now because they would show up to her office and arrest her for some random reason. Take her to jail, and my dad would have to go check her out, basically.
Stop.
Yeah.
What would they do to her there?
Nothing.
Just like
Question
interrogate
her,
her?
hold her. Yeah, hold her. And it was always some guy who was working under her who had complained about something.
And that's like an immediate to jail.
To
It's
jail.
not like a let's reach out to HR and see if we can
Right?
figure out how to chat about this. It's like, let's send the girl to jail.
Yeah.
Wow.
So-
And I'm assuming it's not like a white collar jail with like cushy beds.
I
like it's
don't-
not where like tax
Right?
evaders are going.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know.
It's like a cold cell in
Probably.
Iran in
Probably,
the
yeah.
80s,
Yeah,
70s.
80s, yeah. And
There were no linens with high thread count. No.
no. But I guess the high point is she's never spent a night
Oh, okay.
there.
So she
it was
didn't have
always
to
like-
deal with the pillows.
No, she was always in a holding cell, basically.
Jeez.
And my dad would have to show up and go. I mean, they just took the country back to archaic,
crazy.
you know, prehistoric
Yeah.
women's rights, non-existent type
Right.
situation. So yeah, I mean, they had to leave everything and start from scratch. And
When did you like? There's like a few years when you're like a teenager and stuff where like this stuff is just like it becomes the story.
yes,
So like, you know, you tell people, but there's no like emotional connection to it because you don't understand, like you don't have the emotional intelligence to understand like the struggle at the time.
yes.
I remember like my like moment where I really started to understand my parents as humans and like the struggle. Like when do you remember when that happened to you? Or did you always have like that emotional, and I feel like you're way more emotionally intelligent than I am. Like, let's be honest. I think that's why we're friends.
I think
I say something stupid and you're like, Irene, that was insensitive. But like, why, when, how?
I think I've always had that. I think I
Like,
have
did you
an
always
old
feel
soul.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've always sort of, I'm a rule follower and I like, I
Order,
see,
checklists,
checklists,
spreadsheets,
all
colored
of that.
pens,
all of that,
highlighters,
right?
notebooks. Yeah.
So, so to me, it's kind of like rules and stuff like that comes with obligation, and I've always felt obligation, even as a child, and not in a bad way. I think obligation kind of sets you straight.
Sure.
Also makes you very boring, but that's
Depends
a
who you
different
ask.
story.
If you ask someone that's way more boring, then you're like the most exciting one in the room. Like if you were to meet, I don't know, who do I know that's like a pretty boring person, but like fun human? Oh my God, I can vision his name right now.
I wouldn't be.
Let's
I
not
wouldn't
say
be
it.
calling
Let's
people
not
out.
say
No,
it.
no,
Let's
no,
say it.
no.
But I feel like he would be like, yeah, she's the coolest, but he is also like pretty boring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, so that's my young days.
So okay, so then
Yeah.
you moved to England,
Yes.
and then what?
So we lived in the UK, just because I have family in the UK, and it was sort of the
Yeah.
one that made sense to go
Yeah.
to. But
When you're starting fresh, it's nice to have a
Right.
familiar face, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But then eventually it was sort of Canada had a lot more to offer.
Sure.
For the future and whatnot, and ultimately my parents were making all these decisions for us. So we moved to Canada. That was a harder move because at that
How
stage
old
I was
were you?
15,
No way.
and moving when you're 15, not so much fun because you know
No.
you have your friends, and I was angry about it, and it was like I'm never gonna find.
Did you have an
friends.
accent?
Yes, I did.
You had a British accent?
I did.
And you lost it?
I did because
Damn.
when you're 15, you want to fit in.
Yeah. So
So-
did you have an accent when you moved at 5, or not a little? Oh, you must have a little bit.
No, because I went to an English immersion school
Oh, okay. So you spoke a little
in Iran,
English.
so I
Got it.
spoke full English. So it was, language was never an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool. So then you
Yeah.
lost your accent.
I
Oh.
did.
I know that's
I
not the
did.
most interesting thing about you, or at all, but I've never had a friend with an English accent. Damn.
Darn it.
Go back.
It used to
And
be.
then Canada.
And then Canada,
So
yeah.
teenage years.
Teenage years in Canada. And yeah, high school.
So you okay, I'm flipping forward here because I
Yeah.
know the story. So you basically moved to Canada and met your now husband
That's-
at the same time?
Exactly. So I went into, going back to the English accent.
Oh my God.
So I went to high school,
Yeah.
and it was, he'll tell you, grade 10, Mr. Black's geography class.
No
We sat
way.
next to each other, and he kept poking fun
At your accent?
oh, say this, say that. Exactly.
No way.
And that's how we met.
Stop.
Yeah. And I used to think he was the most annoying person on earth. Which is how all good love stories start.
That's so funny. So you basically were fresh off the boat and then
Yeah.
immediately met your husband.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah, so we were friends for years, and
Yeah.
then, got together, and
And now you've got two
And-
beautiful boys
yeah, we do.
who are amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do I want? Where do I want to go with this? See, this is the hard part as a podcaster when you interview your friends, because you're like, I know stuff. Do I say stuff? And like,
Right.
or do I not say stuff? I think I will, but I
Okay.
think
That's what the edit floor was
that's
for.
what the edit is for. Yeah, that's why we worked so hard for this video, so that it's okay. So dental hygiene. So you're a restorative dental hygienist
I
now.
am.
You also lived in Alberta.
I never lived in
live-
Alberta.
you just practiced in Alberta.
Practiced in Alberta for 8 years
How
while
does-
living in Toronto.
So my nose is running for some reason. Let's go to hygiene. So what made you want to become a dental hygienist?
So, I think I mentioned this in our last chat. So I had a fabulous dental hygienist growing up, and she would always have stories about her travels. Every time, once every 6 months, you showed up in there, and she would have albums of her travels, and she
way.
would take like ridiculously amazing trips. So I remember thinking, well, I want to do this. This is the best job on earth, because you get to pick your hours, you get
Sure.
to travel, you get paid well. It's not, the ultimate level of responsibility as far as because you're not a practice owner.
Sure. Yet.
Yeah, in hindsight. So you get to kind of, once you leave work. This was all sort of the ideal situation in my head. So went into dental hygiene, or at the time we had to be a dental assistant. So went into dental assisting school. While I was in dental assisting school at George Brown, we assisted the restorative students.
So restored. When was this? What year was this?
So this was 1996.
Okay.
5,
so
6, yeah.
Restorative was around that long
yeah.
ago.
Yeah,
Isn't that crazy?
it is.
That there's so many other things that we can't do as dental hygienists, but
Right.
restorative has been around for as long as practice ownership almost. I guess 2000s. Longer, yeah.
Longer, way
2000s was
longer.
practice ownership.
Yeah, way longer.
That is insane.
So,
Okay, I digress.
and I was just blown away by what these hygienists were learning to do.
And this is new. This is students. You
Yeah.
were blown away.
I was blown away.
by the 4-hour restorative
Exactly.
appointment. Exactly. The 25 minutes trying to get a rubber dam on.
Well, it was that or the 4-hour hygiene appointment.
Oh my gosh, right.
Right?
The 2-hour head and neck exam.
Exactly.
Jeez Louise.
So at that time, I think it was the first day of clinic, I decided I want to do that.
Yeah.
So I went, at the time, Debbie Daniels ran the restorative program at George
Okay.
Brown. She also did some clinical teaching for assistants. Well, I became her shadow.
Oh.
I was everywhere she went. I was obsessed, about how I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. So went into dental hygiene. You had to work in between. I worked for 7 months as a dental assistant. Didn't love that.
Yeah.
Went into hygiene, did hygiene, and then technically you're supposed to work a year again between hygiene
Yeah.
and restorative. But I think the obsession and me being around for so long,
You were imprinted.
I was like, so I got a phone call in July,
Yeah.
saying, we have a spot that opened up. Do you want to start in August?
So cool.
And so I started and went into restorative. So I always say I'm the worst hygienist on earth because I've never really fully practiced hygiene.
I mean, you do. You kind of.
Yeah. I've done more hygiene
Right.
in the past 5 years than I did in the first 20 years.
Yeah. That's so cool. It's so interesting that you kind of like, you observe someone do something once. You're like, this is it.
Yeah.
Where it takes people a whole lifetime to figure out what they actually want to
Right?
do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
That must have been one impressive student I assisted.
Yeah, she must have done the best. It must have been me.
It must have been.
Reincarnated. So that's interesting because you like mentioned earlier about you're like a rule follower and a checklister. Like, so you never really diverged from the plan. The plan was the plan, and you just stuck with it.
The plan came late, but when it came, it was like the
Yeah.
light bulb went off. This is what I was made to
So
do.
then, how did you end up practicing in Alberta? Like,
So-
and what does that scope of practice look like in Alberta versus what you
Ontario.
could do here? Yeah.
So when I was in restorative school, I was working part-time as a hygienist. So one of the offices, I worked in two main offices that were regular. The rest were very temp, sort of day here, day there. So one of the offices that I worked at said, oh my God, this is the coolest thing. As soon as you're done restorative, you're going to work for us. The other office I worked at said, that sounds really bizarre. You're never going to use that here.
No way.
I said, okay,
Right.
good enough.
Yeah.
I'm just working as a hygienist. Well, fast forward, the office who was fully committed, I think I worked as a restorative hygienist maybe twice, and it just never took off.
Really?
And the office that
What do you think
said-
that was that caused that?
I think it all depends on how you introduce it to the patient base. So I remember the first set of fillings that I was doing, I looked up at some point and there was like 4 heads like this
Like
over the
watching you?
operatory. And patients feel that because they're like, is this something weird? What's
Is this
happening?
new? Yeah.
Is this new?
Is this her first time?
Exactly.
So was it the dentist? Who was it that was
it
staring
was,
over you?
It was the hygienists. It was the front desk people. It was the assistants.
like what's it, like? What were they looking at? It's just another person doing fillings.
Right. It was an older practice, so patients were a lot older as well. The staff who worked there had been there for 20 some odd years, and I was this 20-year-old
Right.
girl who arrived. They'd never heard of a restorative hygienist, and here I am doing fillings.
Right.
So it just didn't mesh with
Yeah.
their practice.
Yeah.
Whereas the other practice, younger guy, really innovative, really wanted to kind of always better what was offered to the patients and whatnot. And I guess he was at a stage where he was looking to hire an associate.
Right.
So slowly he started to ask me questions as I was in school and realized, well, maybe this would be better because I still get to control what happens to my patients, what
And he still
treatment they're
makes
getting.
most of the production.
Exactly.
Right.
And so we slowly started talking about it more, whatnot. And so when I finished school, my uncle needed a whole lot of fillings.
Yeah.
So I went to my boss and said, listen, I know you said you're never going to try this, but I knew he was interested because he was asking me a lot of questions. I said, my uncle needs a whole bunch of fillings. You get to be his dentist if I get to do the fillings.
Oh.
And he was like, okay. So we did that, and that was it.
That was the start.
That was the start. He thought it was brilliant. He's very good at entrusting you and empowering you, which goes a long way when you're new as well.
Yeah.
Didn't question my stuff and just made it as if, matter of fact, we've been doing this forever to the patients.
Yeah.
It wasn't this big to-do about, oh my God, what's going to happen next,
Yeah.
right? And that was it. We started 1 day a week. Pretty quickly, it became full-time. And I've never looked back. So I still work
cool.
with the same guy. It's 25 years. He grew his practices.
Is this Matt?
Yeah.
Matt.
So he...
What's up, Matt?
He started sort of increasing practices. He had... And,
Right.
went across the country, Alberta being one of the provinces that
Is there restorative in Alberta?
I was the first one registered.
No way.
Yeah, so they have it, but they didn't really have it. So when
Yeah.
I called the college, they were like, yeah, we see it here. You can register as one,
Yeah.
but we don't really have one on the roster.
That's so cool.
And yeah, it was, well, since then, though, we have sent probably 4 of our hygienists back to school at George Brown. They did restorative, and now they're back in Alberta doing restorative. So
Cool. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like a super underutilized designation for hygienists.
Agreed.
And like there aren't many that talk about it aloud.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you have to know someone or follow someone on social media, but then a lot of restorative hygienists, I don't see many posting cases like docs
Right.
do, you know?
Right.
I'm trying, but that's
Yeah.
always, tough. So it's this thing. It's like people are doing it. There's thousands of us, but it's just this interesting gap in
Yeah.
publicly
Knowledge.
speaking about it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any courses ever written for restorative hygienists. So whenever I go to a course, I'm among the docs.
Yes.
But I get the cheaper price because I get
Yes.
to be the team
Exactly.
member. It's like doctor
Exactly.
or other. I'm like, other. $200 off.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. But I think that that's changing. I think that with more of us like being public about it, that's changing quite a bit, and for the better. I mean, it's not competition. I think
No.
that's what like a lot of docs feel, that it's going to be this competition, that like someone else is going to do the restos, but it's a collaborative
Yeah.
effort. I think that's where.
And
we
I
need to
honestly
think
do think it comes down to your patient base. You still have more control over them than if you
Right.
have an associate that you've just handed off your patient
Right.
base to, right?
Right. You're prepping. You're
prepping.
making that
You're
first.
deciding the treatment.
Right. You're deciding that first
Yeah.
step.
Yeah.
That's true. Interesting. Cool. Well,
So as far as what things you can do differently in Alberta.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, for anyone that's listening to this, know that like we're not part of the College of Dental
No.
Hygienists of Alberta or Ontario. So like this is complete anecdotal stuff, and like don't just run and pick up a handpiece. Like I encourage
No,
you to
please don't.
look at the scope of practice or like ask us personally. But
Yes.
what are like
So the big difference
big
is,
differences?
in Alberta, hygienists can give
Local.
And that makes a huge difference in the restorative practice and the hygiene practice.
Yeah.
So that was something that I had taken local before because there was talks of it coming to Ontario. So I went to Michigan University, did local. It never really panned out in Ontario yet.
Yeah.
But then in Alberta, I went back to school again and did the local. And so in Alberta, I could give local, but then I would be on the next flight to Toronto, and I had to think,
Wait, where
yeah,
am
no,
I
no,
again?
can't give local.
Yeah.
So that I think Alberta is definitely a lot more
Liberal?
liberal in certain ways, and then not in certain other ways. But the scope of practice definitely supports like independent hygiene better as well, with X-rays.
Yeah.
With
Diagnosis, I think.
prescriptions.
Prescription. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I
So-
could do a whole episode on like the need for unity.
Yes, it would be nice. It would be
yeah.
very nice
For sure.
to have the scope of practice that's universal.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
I mean, we're not a huge country population-wise.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we should leave this part one, getting to know Tina, and then in part two, I want us to go back to the smile room because a
Yeah.
lot's changed for you in the smile
Yes.
room. So let's do that.
All right.
You cool with that? All right.
Cool.
Stay tuned for part two, peeps, with Tina Maviryannakis. I'll catch you on the flip side. Peace out.
Bye.